also like to kind of, bump that up against what it might be like in other towns. Any experience you can offer the folks from that regard?
I have a few friends actually that work for the state police, and
Okay.
I have a few that work in a couple towns around here. I think southern New Hampshire as a whole it's pretty much the same.
Yeah.
There's some towns obviously that don't have the commuter traffic and stuff like that, and some, but for the most part, as far as crime rates and stuff goes,
Yeah.
southern New Hampshire has been on the rise recently. I say each town is probably similar.
Yeah.
Manchester's obviously has a lot
Yeah.
more problems than any other
Yep.
town in the state. But for the most part, Derry's probably a little bit busier,
Yeah.
bigger population. But
Yeah.
for the most part, we're a decent sized town in this southern part of the state. So I'd say we're probably one of the busier towns in the state. Right next to Salem and Derry, I'd say
Yeah.
we're probably within the top
Yeah.
three.
That's what I would think too, just based on my 17 years of being here, that we've reached a point in population and popularity and our adjacent nature to things like the airport that you guys would probably be a little bit busier than normal based on our location. How about let's talk about before you go on a shift. Folks have seen TV shows about this stuff, what roll call is like. I'm assuming that you guys, before you go out on the shift, there's some kind of a meeting that you have about what you're supposed to look for. Is there such a thing? Does that happen before the team goes out on the shift?
Sure, there is a roll
Yeah.
call. Our shifts overlap by a half an hour.
Okay.
And traditionally, day shift has roll call at 6:15. The afternoon shift has it at 2:15.
Okay.
And then the midnight shift has it at 10:15. And that's where the off-going sergeant will sit down and he'll read the log from the previous shifts to the oncoming sergeant, and the oncoming shift is there.
Okay.
And then once that's done, that sergeant will leave, and then the shift sergeant will go through. We have a binder that we keep that has everything from officer safety,
Yeah.
bulletins, to memos from the administration, to policy changes, to BOLOs, which is be on the lookout for other things, crimes of interest, any trends that we want to pass on to the other shifts, while you guys are out there, look for this, look
Yeah.
for that. So yeah, and roll call usually takes, it depends, but 15 minutes or so?
Yeah.
Yeah. So there is that kind of exchange of information, that heads up to kind of understand what, when you go out, what you're supposed to look for and what information you may need to know. Okay.
Yes. Yeah,
all right.
absolutely.
Cool. One thing I wanted to get to, and I know my daughter doesn't watch this show, she goes by it on the TV, but I wanted to ask it anyways. I get the impression that we have a lot of younger folks who drive, and with the things that we've talked about, just the nature of the road network in Londonderry and so forth, what interaction patrol officers have with the younger drivers, and what kind of advice you might have if they happen to be watching the show.
Slow down. It's tough because it wasn't that long ago when I was
Right.
just learning
Yeah.
to drive, and
Much longer for
maybe
me.
not for some,
Yeah.
Much longer for me.
Yeah.
But
I am 20 years older than him.
and it's a lot of it is the state is put mandates on driver's license, the youth operator license,
Yeah.
and if you get a moving violation, they automatically suspend your license for 20 days on top of whatever the fine may be for
Yeah.
the moving violation. So, you need to
Yeah.
just slow down and pay attention.
Yeah.
Is pretty much.
Yeah.
Well, I can
Source
speak
driving.
from personal experience. I got my license suspended when I was 17 years old. That was a
Okay.
long time ago.
Yeah.
I'll tell you, that was back in the late 70s.
Yeah.
So I can speak from personal experience. But when I stop a young driver who's committed a violation,
Yeah.
very rarely give a warning. And
Yeah.
there's a reason for that,
Yeah.
because I reason that their parents have already drilled it into them how to
Yeah.
drive and be safe. They've
Yeah.
already paid good money to go to driver's ed.
We're trying.
And they've drilled it into them
Yeah.
to be safe. And apparently they're just not getting the message.
Yeah.
So to me personally,
Yeah.
they've used up their warnings.
Yeah.
And now we've got to take it to the next level, and that's
Yeah.
a summons.
Yeah.
If I stop an older driver who's got some experience and can convince me that they just made an honest mistake, then for the
Yeah.
most part, it's going to be a warning. But
Yeah.
younger drivers, like I said, because of their lack of experience and the fact they've already been through
Yeah.
training and have been told what's going to happen.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah. This might be more so for you, but I think Garrett can answer it too. With the advent of technology, I think you guys have seen that driving a car is a little bit more than it used to be. And I'm not talking just about cell phones, although that's obviously an issue, but cell phones and GPSs and lots of gadgets, and I have my own. I mean, how does that play into it, whether it's a young driver or someone else? I mean, is paying attention on the road a little bit more challenging now than it used to be?
Well, it is, and they just don't have the skills. They just don't have the mental, the skills or the experience to be able to do two things at once.
Yeah.
I mean, it is what it is. I mean, they've got to pay attention. Until you get that experience, you might be able to make an emergency cell phone call while you're driving.
Yeah.
Of course, we prefer if you pull off at the side of the road.
Right.
But yeah, it's basically just comes down to the lack of experience. They're just not adept yet at operating a motor vehicle and then using some sort of a cell phone or looking at a GPS or even just changing the stereo, the channel on the radio.
Yeah.
And that's what happens. There was an accident this morning in town with a juvenile driver. I didn't get any specifics, but
Okay. All right, so young kids, listen up, including my daughter. Also, in terms of, and John, you just mentioned that, it sounds like, with the training you've had and going through the academy, that obviously there's a large people component here, and there appears that you guys need to have the ability to kind of make some objective calls on the road, whether it's a warning or not. Can you explain to the viewing audience the latitude that a patrol officer has and how you make those judgments like that?
Well, one of the most powerful things that a patrolman has, and one of the largest responsibility, is discretion. And
that's what I meant.
I mean, there's a great deal of discretion given to the regular patrol officer. And I use that word regular patrol because, as far as I'm concerned, there's no such thing as just a patrolman. Yeah. If you're a regular patrolman. Yeah. And it comes with a great deal of responsibility. I mean, could I stop every single violation? Well, if I was physically able to. By law, sure. Could I write a ticket for everything? Of course I could. But the legislature decided a long, long time ago, long before I was born, that this is not a black and white world. We don't live in a black and white society. That we've got to be able to disseminate or be discreet and be able to make those decisions. Yeah. And I mean, Garrett has his own way of doing things. Every officer has their own way of doing things. Right. And there is no quota in the town of Londonderry. We are not sent out there to write X amount of tickets.
That I know personally.
We don't have to do that.
Right.
So it basically comes down to...
We don't get money for it either.
That's
it goes to the state.
That's right. Yeah. So there is no quota in the town of Londonderry. So if I stop somebody for a violation, like I said, I tend to treat younger drivers a little bit differently, and that's for a reason. Yeah. The way I do things, if I think somebody is going to benefit from a warning, then that's what I give them. Right. If for some reason during our interaction I start to realize that a warning is not going to do this person any good, or we have the ability to check their motor vehicle record, and they've got a very lengthy motor vehicle record. Well, it's obvious that they're not learning their lesson. Right. And so in that instant, I might write a summons. Right. But you're right, we have a great deal of discretion in not only enforcing the motor vehicle code, but in the laws of the state. Right. Now, there are some laws that the legislature, and Garrett mentioned it earlier, have mandated that we don't have discretion. Right. And some of those are the domestic violence laws, some of the juvenile laws with regards to alcohol, we don't have the discretion. Right. But for other things, we do. It's a big responsibility. Yeah. And the more you do it, the more experience you get better at it. Yeah. Yeah. Anything to add to that in terms of being a younger officer, in terms of using that discretion?
Yeah. I mean, like I said, I can put myself in some of the younger kids' shoes, because I was pulled over as a kid. It happens. I mean, the biggest thing, like you said, is paying attention. Is texting and stuff like that. That stuff that wasn't around when I started driving. I mean, just the cell phones were just coming out. But and it's just not worth it to lose your license. I think it's hopefully that's why the laws are designed that way. So they learn their lesson. 20 days, you lose your license. You see how hard it can be, and you don't make that mistake. The next time. So. Yeah. Okay. John, I wanted to go back and talk about the canine piece, if you don't mind, without getting into specifics of cases. When you're called to a particular call where you're going to actually employ Kip to do his job, and let's say it's a tracking situation where you're either tracking someone who did something wrong and you're trying to catch them, or you're looking for someone. Take us through the process. I'm assuming there's things that you need to be careful with because of scents and all that kind of stuff. Sure. There's a lot of things to be taken into consideration before I deploy my dog. By policy, before I deploy him, we need to be looking for somebody who's either missing and an endanger to themselves,
or somebody who's committed a crime.
Okay.
Because we do incur a certain amount of liability every time that dog gets out of the car.
Yeah.
So having said that, if I go to a crime scene and somebody has fled, I have to weigh several factors.